What happens when prejudice meets power in the one place where everyone is supposed to be equal? In the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors of JFK International, a 17-year-old girl, a certified genius on the verge of changing the world, holds a golden ticket. Not to a chocolate factory, but to the front of the plane, first class. But one gate agent, fueled by a quiet bitterness, sees not a prodigy, but a target. She sees a black teenager and decides with a sneer that the ticket must be a fraud. What she doesn't know is that with one press of a button on her phone, this young girl isn't just calling her dad. She's about to call down the thunder. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 was a familiar symphony of chaos. The rolling thunder of suitcases on tile, the polyglot murmur of 1,000 simultaneous conversations, the distant automated female voice announcing boarding zones and final calls. It was the sound of humanity in motion. For 17-year-old Jordan Williams, it was the sound of the future. Tucked into a seat at Gate B42, she was an island of calm in the swirling current of anxious travelers. Her backpack, a sleek minimalist design from a brand called Air, rested at her feet. Inside, nestled between a MacBook Pro and a binder full of algorithmic schematics, was the culmination of 2 years of her life, a small encrypted solid-state drive. On that drive was Nexus's, a revolutionary data compression application she had coded in her bedroom between AP Physics homework and college applications. Nexus wasn't just good, it was a paradigm shift. It could reduce massive data packets by 98% with zero fidelity loss, a feat that giants like Google and Amazon had poured billions into chasing. That drive was why she was here, holding a first-class ticket for Apex Air Flight 215 to San Francisco. In 3 days, she would be the keynote speaker at InnovateX, the world's most prestigious tech conference. She wasn't just a speaker, she was the recipient of their Phoenix Grant, an award given to a young innovator poised to change the industry. The grant came with a $250,000 prize and, more importantly, a seat at the table with the titans of Silicon Valley. The first-class ticket was their way of saying, "Welcome to the club." Jordan smoothed out the crisp paper of her boarding pass for the 10th time. Williams Jordan, Seat 2A Zone 1. It felt surreal. She'd flown before, but always in the back, crammed between a reclining seat and a crying baby. 2A was different. It was a statement. She glanced up at the gate counter. 2 agents were working. One, a man in his late 20s with a kind, tired smile, was patiently explaining baggage fees to an elderly couple. The other was a woman who looked to be in her late 40s. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her lipstick was a slash of crimson that seemed to accentuate the permanent downturn of her mouth. Her name tag read, Karen Miller. Jordan watched as Karen handled a passenger, a businessman in a wrinkled suit. He asked a simple question about the flight status, and Karen responded with a sigh so theatrical it could have reached the back row of a Broadway theater. Her voice was sharp, laced with an impatience that suggested the man's question was a personal insult. Jordan felt a prickle of unease. She'd encountered people like Karen before, people who seemed to carry a storm cloud around with them, eager to make it rain on everyone else. "We will now begin pre-boarding for Apex Air Flight 215 to San Francisco," the Kinder agent, whose name tag read David Chen, announced into the microphone. "We invite our active-duty military members and guests requiring special assistance to approach the gate at this time." A few minutes passed. Then came the announcement Jordan was waiting for. "We now invite our first-class passengers, Zone 1, to begin boarding." Jordan stood up, her heart giving a little flutter of excitement. She slung her air backpack over one shoulder, took a deep breath, and walked the short distance to the boarding lane, her authentic leather sneakers squeaking faintly on the polished floor. She was the third person in line. The couple in front of her, wealthy and draped in cashmere, were greeted with saccharine smiles by Karen. Their boarding passes were scanned with a flourish. Then it was Jordan's turn. She stepped forward and handed her boarding pass and passport to Karen Miller. "Good afternoon," Jordan said, her voice clear and polite. Karen took the documents without making eye contact, her eyes fixed on the screen of her terminal. She scanned the passport. Williams, Jordan, United States of America. Then she scanned the boarding pass. A small affirmative beep sounded from the machine, but Karen didn't move. She finally lifted her gaze from the screen and let it travel over Jordan. A slow, deliberate appraisal that felt less like a security check and more like a judgment. She took in the stylish but casual hoodie, the expensive sneakers, the neat braids adorned with a few subtle silver rings. And her eyes, a flat, unforgiving blue, hardened. "Funny," Karen said, her voice just loud enough for the people nearby to hear. She tapped the boarding pass with a perfectly manicured nail. "The machine says this is real." Jordan's smile faltered. "I'm sorry?" "Zone 1, Seat 2A, Karen continued, a smirk playing on her lips. She held the ticket up as if it were a curious artifact. "First class. That's a very expensive ticket for a girl like you. Did you get lost on your way to the back of the plane?" The air crackled. The businessman behind Jordan shifted uncomfortably. David Chen, the other agent, glanced over, a flicker of concern on his face. Jordan felt a familiar heat rise in her chest, but she forced it down. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "Never let them see you sweat. Grace is a weapon they don't know how to fight." "No, I'm in the right place," Jordan said, her tone even. "Apex sent the ticket. I'm speaking at a conference." Karen let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a derisive, ugly sound. "A conference? Right. And I'm the Queen of England. Honey, let's stop playing games. Where did you get this? Did you print it out at the library? Did your boyfriend buy it for you with his mom's credit card?" Each question was a calculated jab, designed to humiliate and provoke. The implication was clear, hanging thick and toxic in the air. A young black woman couldn't possibly belong here on her own merit. "This ticket is legitimate," Jordan stated, refusing to be drawn into an argument. "It was booked by the InnovateX Foundation. You can look them up. Now, may I please have my boarding pass so I can get on the plane?" "No," Karen said, her smirk widening into a triumphant grin. She enjoyed this. She enjoyed the power she wielded from behind her little counter. "I don't think you will." And with a deliberate theatrical motion, she ripped the boarding pass in two, the sound tearing through the quiet tension at the gate. She dropped the pieces onto the counter. "We have a zero-tolerance policy for fraudulent documents at Apex Air," Karen announced loudly, her voice ringing with false authority. "You should have tried for a coach ticket, sweetie. It would have been more believable. Now I'm going to have to ask you to step aside before I call security." The world seemed to slow down. Jordan stared at the two halves of her ticket lying on the cold laminate counter. The symbol of her achievement, torn apart by sheer, unadulterated prejudice. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot flush on her cheeks. She could feel dozens of eyes on her, some curious, some pitying, some sharing in Karen's smug satisfaction. But then, the humiliation receded, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. She had been calm. She had been polite. She had followed the rules. Karen Miller had just made a very, very big mistake. Jordan didn't raise her voice. She didn't cry. She simply met Karen's gaze and held it. "You're right," Jordan said, her voice chillingly quiet. "You should make a call." She reached into her pocket, pulled out her iPhone 16 Pro, and unlocked it with her face. "But I'll go first." The act of tearing the boarding pass was a declaration of war. For Karen Miller, it was the climax of her power trip, the moment she reasserted control over her small kingdom of Gate B42. She saw the shock on the girl's face, the flicker of hurt in her eyes, and it fed a starved part of her soul. She felt vindicated. She had caught a fraud, protected the integrity of her airline, and put a presumptuous teenager in her place. David Chen, her co-worker, hurried over. "Karen, what are you doing?" he hissed, his eyes wide with alarm. "The scan went through. The ticket was valid." "The scanner can be fooled, David," Karen shot back, not bothering to lower her voice. She wanted everyone to hear. "Use your eyes. It's obvious. There's no way she belongs in first class. It's a textbook fake. I'm saving the company from a lawsuit when the real passenger for 2A shows up. A man in the first-class line, a portly executive named Mr. Harrison, who had witnessed the entire exchange, finally spoke up. "This is outrageous," he said, his voice a low rumble of disapproval. "I saw the whole thing. The girl was perfectly polite. You, on the other hand, have been completely unprofessional." Karen turned her glare on him. "Sir, with all due respect, this is an official security matter and it doesn't concern you. Please stay out of it." But the gears were already turning. The accusation of a fraudulent ticket, especially for a premium cabin, was serious. It meant security, paperwork, and delays. Karen was creating a vortex of trouble, and she was at its calm, smiling center. Jordan, however, remained preternaturally calm. She ignored the torn paper. She ignored the whispers rippling through the growing crowd of onlookers. Her focus was entirely on her phone. Her thumb moved with purpose across the screen, tapping on a single contact saved under the simple name, Dad. She lifted the phone to her ear. Karen watched, a scoff ready on her lips. Who was she calling? Her mommy? A boyfriend to come and make a scene? It was pathetic. The phone connected after a single ring. "Hi, Dad," Jordan said, her voice steady and clear, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy around her. "Sorry to bother you at work." She paused, listening. "I'm fine, but there's a situation. I'm at JFK, Terminal 4, Gate B42, Apex Air. The gate agent seems to believe my ticket is fraudulent." Karen rolled her eyes, making a show of it for the other passengers. This was even better than she'd hoped. A little daddy's girl. Jordan continued. "Yes, the one Innovate X booked. That's right. Seat 2A. Well, she just tore up my boarding pass." She listened again, a small, wry smile touching her lips for the first time. "No, Dad, don't yell. I'm handling it." "Her name?" Jordan's eyes flicked up and met Karen's, a cold fire in their depths. She read the name tag aloud, enunciating each syllable perfectly. "Karen. Miller." She held Karen's gaze as she spoke into the phone. "Yes, that's her. She's refusing me passage and has threatened to call security." Another pause. "Okay, what's the ETA?" Jordan's eyebrows raised slightly. 5 minutes, that's efficient." "Okay, I'll wait right here. Love you too." She ended the call and slipped the phone back into her pocket. She looked at Karen, her expression unreadable. "My father is handling it," she said simply. "He said to wait here." Karen burst into laughter. It was a genuine, mocking cackle this time. "Oh, your father is handling it. I'm shaking in my boots. What's he going to do? Send a strongly worded email? Write a bad Yelp review? Listen, kid, I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've seen every trick in the book. This little performance is cute, but the show's over." She pointed a rigid finger away from the gate. "I'm giving you one last chance to walk away from this counter before you're being escorted out in handcuffs for causing a disturbance." "I was told to wait here," Jordan repeated, her voice like steel. She didn't move an inch. She just stood there, a silent, unshakable challenge. The standoff was absolute. The line for the flight had completely stalled. Passengers were grumbling, craning their necks to see the source of the drama. David Chen was frantically speaking into his own headset, likely to a supervisor, his face pale with stress. Mr. Harrison, the businessman, had taken out his own phone and was discreetly recording the entire interaction. For Karen, this was the final straw. The girl's calm defiance was more infuriating than any shouting match would have been. It was as if she knew something Karen didn't. The arrogance. "Fine, have it your way," Karen snapped. She picked up the phone at her station, her knuckles white as she jabbed the button for airport security. "Yes, this is Karen Miller at Apex Gate B42. I have a disruptive individual here refusing to comply with crew member instructions. She is attempting to board with fraudulent documents. I need Port Authority police here immediately." She slammed the phone down, her chest heaving with adrenaline and rage. She gave Jordan a look of pure venom. "You're in real trouble now, little girl. You have no idea who you're messing with." Jordan almost smiled. "No," she said softly. "You have no idea." 2 minutes passed. 3. The tension was so thick it was almost suffocating. Passengers were now openly filming with their phones. The name Karen Miller was being whispered up and down the line. Then, a change. It wasn't the 2 Port Authority officers Karen was expecting. It started with the massive flight information boards that hung from the ceiling of the terminal. They all flickered at once. Every flight to Los Angeles, London, Tokyo vanished. They were replaced by 3 words in stark, blocky red letters. Terminal-wide security alert. All flight operations suspended. Await instructions. A collective gasp swept through the terminal. A confused, panicked murmur erupted into a roar of 1,000 voices. And then the PA system, which moments before had been announcing boarding zones, crackled to life. But it wasn't the calm, automated voice. It was a man's voice, stern and official, with an unmistakable edge of command. "This is a federal security announcement. By order of the Department of Homeland Security, all operations at Terminal 4 are hereby suspended. I repeat, all flight operations are suspended. All passengers are to remain in place. All airport and airline staff are to stand by for federal agent instructions." Karen Miller's triumphant smirk dissolved. The color drained from her face, leaving her crimson lipstick looking garish and absurd. She stared at the red screens, then at Jordan, her mind refusing to connect the 2 events. It had to be a coincidence, a terror threat, a drill. It had to be. But then she saw them, striding down the center of the concourse, moving with a purpose that parted the sea of confused travelers, were not 2 Port Authority cops. It was a group of 6 individuals. They wore dark, impeccably tailored suits. Their faces were grim, their eyes scanning, missing nothing. They had earpieces and pins on their lapels that didn't signify an airline or airport authority. They were feds, and they were walking directly, unswervingly, towards Gate B42. The arrival of the federal agents shifted the atmosphere from chaotic to hyper-focused. The ambient noise of the terminal seemed to fall away, replaced by a singular, sharp point of tension. The agents moved with an unnerving synchronicity, their hard-soled shoes echoing on the floor. The lead agent, a tall man with graying temples and a face carved from granite, had his eyes locked on Gate B42. David Chen saw them coming and looked like he was about to faint. He grabbed Karen's arm. "Karen, what did you do?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "Who is that girl?" Karen was frozen, her mind a frantic scramble of denial. "It's not her," she stammered, more to herself than to David. "It's a drill. It's a security threat. It has nothing to do with her." But even as she said it, she knew it was a lie. The lead agent's path was too precise. He wasn't scanning the terminal for a suspicious package. He was heading for a specific target. The agents arrived at the gate, forming a loose, intimidating semicircle around the counter. They completely ignored Karen and David. The lead agent's eyes found Jordan immediately. His stern expression softened almost imperceptibly, with a hint of recognition and concern. "Miss Williams?" he asked, his voice calm but resonant with authority. "Agent Thompson, DHS. Your father sent us." The name, Agent Thompson, DHS, hit Karen like a physical blow. Department of Homeland Security, not airport police, not airline management, Homeland Security, the federal body that oversees the entire national security apparatus, including the TSA, Customs and Border Protection, and the very aviation regulations that governed her career. Karen felt the floor drop out from beneath her. Her carefully constructed world of petty tyranny was being dismantled brick by brick in front of an audience of hundreds. Jordan nodded to Agent Thompson. "Thank you for coming so quickly." The deputy secretary was insistent, Agent Thompson replied, a ghost of a smile on his face. He then turned his attention to the scene, his professional demeanor snapping back into place. His gaze fell upon the 2 torn pieces of Jordan's boarding pass on the counter. He looked from the torn ticket to Karen, who was now as white as a sheet. "Ma'am," he said, his voice dropping several degrees in temperature. "Did you do this?" Karen opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her mind raced, searching for an escape route, a justification, a way to spin this, but there was none. Her own words, her own actions had built this cage around her. David Chen, seeing his career flashing before his eyes, stepped forward. "Sir, my name is David Chen. I'm the floor supervisor for this gate area. There's been a misunderstanding." Agent Thompson's gaze flickered to him, cold and dismissive. "A misunderstanding? It is my understanding that your agent, Miss Miller," he said, glancing at her name tag, "accused a validated, ticketed first-class passenger of fraud, publicly humiliated her, and then destroyed her official travel document. Is that the misunderstanding you're referring to?" I thought it was fake," Karen finally managed to choke out, her voice a pathetic squeak. "I was following protocol." "Protocol," a new voice cut in. An Apex Air corporate manager, a man named Philip Lancaster, had come sprinting down the concourse, his tie askew and his face slick with sweat. He had clearly been alerted by David and had seen the DHS alert. "What protocol involves ripping a passenger's boarding pass in half? Karen, have you lost your mind?" Lancaster turned to Agent Thompson, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Agent, on behalf of Apex Air, I am so deeply, profoundly sorry for this incident. This is not who we are. We will handle this employee immediately." Agent Thompson held up a hand, silencing him. "Mr. Lancaster, with all due respect, this is no longer just an airline customer service issue. When Miss Miller destroyed a travel document and denied passage to a citizen under these circumstances, she wasn't just being rude. She was interfering with a federally regulated process, and when she did it to this particular citizen," he gestured to Jordan, "she created a national security variable." A national security variable. The phrase hung in the air, absurd and terrifying. Karen stared at Jordan, this quiet, unassuming teenager. Who was she? The daughter of a senator, a governor? Agent Thompson wasn't finished. He looked back at Karen, his eyes like chips of ice. "Your actions, Miss Miller, triggered a specific alert protocol linked to the passenger's profile. A protocol that assumes a bad actor is attempting to obstruct or harm a person of interest to the United States government. That is why Terminal 4 is currently shut down. Not because of a bomb threat, but because of you." The weight of that statement settled over the entire gate area. Every delayed flight, every missed connection, every panicked passenger, it was all because of her. Her sneer, her laugh, her petty act of tearing a piece of paper. Mr. Harrison, the businessman who had been recording, stepped forward and addressed Agent Thompson. "Sir, for what it's worth, I witnessed the entire exchange. This young lady," he said, nodding respectfully at Jordan, "was a model of grace. The agent was abusive from the start." He held up his phone. "And I have a video of the whole thing." Agent Thompson gave a curt nod. "We'll take a copy of that, sir. Thank you." He then turned to two of his agents. "Escort Miss Miller to the airport substation. Secure her credentials and all personal effects. She is to have no further contact with airline or airport systems. The U.S. Attorney's Office will be in touch." The two agents moved forward. One gently but firmly took Karen by the arm. The reality finally crashed through her denial. This was it. This was the end of her career, the end of her life as she knew it. "No," she whispered, trying to pull her arm back. "You can't do this. I have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," Agent Thompson said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "I strongly suggest you start exercising it." As the agents led a now sobbing Karen Miller away, the crowd of passengers watched in stunned silence. They had come for a drama, and they had gotten one of historic proportions. With Karen gone, the atmosphere began to thaw. Agent Thompson turned back to Jordan. "Miss Williams, I apologize for this spectacle. We're arranging a private government transport to get you to San Francisco. It's waiting on the tarmac. You won't miss your conference." Jordan finally let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Thank you, Agent Thompson. That's very kind, but it's not necessary. I just want to get on my flight." Philip Lancaster, the Apex manager, saw a sliver of an opportunity to salvage the situation. Of course, Miss Williams. Absolutely. We will reboard the flight immediately. You will have the entire first-class cabin to yourself if you wish. Anything you want, please. Jordan considered it for a moment. Then she looked at the faces of the other passengers, the ones who had been inconvenienced, the families with tired children, the people who just wanted to get home. Just get the plane boarded, she said. All of it. Get these people on their way. Agent Thompson nodded, impressed by her composure. He spoke into his wrist communicator. Stand down the alert, I have the asset. I repeat, stand down the alert. Reopen the terminal. Across the concourse, the red screens flickered back to life, displaying the familiar lists of departures and destinations. The PA system clicked on with the calm, automated voice as if nothing had happened. The crisis was over, but the consequences were just beginning to unfold. As Jordan finally walked down the jet bridge, escorted by a mortified airline manager, she couldn't help but wonder about the man on the other end of the phone call. Her father, Marcus Williams, the Deputy Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, a man who had once told her, "The most powerful people don't have to raise their voice, they just make a call." The walk down the jet bridge was a surreal journey from one reality to another. Behind her lay the chaos of the terminal, the echoes of Karen Miller's unraveling, and the steely competence of the federal agents. Ahead of her lay the serene, hushed cabin of Apex Air's first class. The flight attendants greeted her with faces that were a mixture of awe, terror, and profound apology. The purser, a woman named Eleanor, personally escorted her to seat 2A. "Miss Williams," Eleanor said, her voice trembling slightly. "On behalf of the entire crew, there are no words. I am so sorry for what you experienced. Please let me know if there is anything, and I mean anything, we can do for you." "Thank you," Jordan said, offering a small, tired smile. "I'm okay. I just want to get to San Francisco." As she settled into the plush leather seat, which felt more like a personal pod than a simple chair, the other first-class passengers boarded. They gave her a wide berth, their glances a mix of curiosity and respect. Mr. Harrison, the businessman, caught her eye as he passed on his way to his seat. He gave her a slow, deliberate nod, a silent acknowledgement of the incredible poise she had shown. Once the plane was fully boarded and pushing back from the gate, Jordan's phone buzzed. It was a text from her dad. "Dad, on the ground in SFO?" "Jordan, just push back. Thanks for the backup, Dad. It was a little more dramatic than I expected." "Dad, I heard. Thompson gave me the rundown. I'm proud of how you handled yourself. You stayed calm. You didn't sink to her level. That's my girl." "Jordan, I remembered what you taught me, but shutting down the whole terminal, was that really necessary?" "Dad, it's a protocol, Jordan. It's not personal. You have a security flag on your travel profile. A quiet one. If your travel is ever forcibly obstructed by an unknown actor, it triggers an automatic escalating response. The system assumes it's a potential kidnapping or worse. It's designed to lock everything down until we can verify you're safe." The agent's actions tripped every wire. Jordan stared at the text. A security flag, a protocol. It sounded so sterile, so bureaucratic, but she had just witnessed its real-world application. It was a hammer, and Karen Miller had brought it down on her own head. "Jordan, what's going to happen to her?" "Dad, don't worry about that. Focus on your conference. Knock 'em dead. I'll see you in a few days. Love you." She put her phone away as the plane began its powerful ascent, banking over the vast sprawl of New York City. Below, JFK was humming back to life, but the incident at Gate B42 was already metastasizing, spreading through the digital bloodstream of the modern world. Mr. Harrison's video, crisp and damning, had been sent to a journalist friend at a major news network before the plane was even at cruising altitude. By the time Jordan's flight was over Nebraska, the story was the #1 trending topic on Twitter. The initial headline was stark. "Gate agent fired, federally detained after tearing black teen's first-class ticket at JFK." The video was a viral sensation. It showed everything: Karen's condescending smirk, Jordan's unshakable calm, the theatrical rip of the ticket, and Karen's mocking laughter about Jordan's father. It was a masterclass in prejudice, captured in high definition. The internet, in its collective and often merciless judgment, descended upon Karen Miller. Her name, her face, her actions were everywhere. She became, in the space of a few hours, one of the most reviled people in America. The fallout for Apex Air was catastrophic. Their stock, which had been stable, plummeted 12% in after-hours trading. Their social media channels were a raging inferno of outrage. The hashtag #FlyApexHate was trending worldwide. The corporation's carefully crafted image of inclusive premium service was torched. In a sterile boardroom in Dallas, the CEO of Apex Air, a man named Robert Morrison, was in full-blown crisis mode. On a conference call with his board of directors and his PR team, the mood was grim. "How did this happen?" Morrison demanded, his voice hoarse. "Who is Karen Miller? What's her file say?" A frantic HR executive shuffled his papers. Sir, it's not good. Miller has been with us for 22 years. She has 12 formal passenger complaints on her record for rudeness. 6 of them involve accusations of racial bias." "6?" Morrison roared. "And she was still employed? Still customer-facing?" Her direct supervisor was David Chen, the HR exec stammered. He noted the complaints but only ever gave her verbal warnings. He rated her as meeting expectations on her last performance review. He wanted to avoid the paperwork of a formal disciplinary action. The systemic failure was laid bare. It wasn't just one rogue employee. It was a culture of mediocrity and conflict avoidance that had allowed a cancer like Karen Miller to fester for years. David Chen's attempt to avoid paperwork had just cost the company hundreds of millions of dollars in market value and inflicted incalculable damage on its brand. The first heads began to roll. Philip Lancaster, the gate manager, was fired for failing to oversee his team. David Chen was suspended without pay, pending termination. But the biggest consequences were yet to come. Meanwhile, in a sterile interrogation room at JFK, Karen Miller was learning the true scope of her disaster. 2 lawyers from the U.S. Attorney's Office were explaining her situation in cold, legal terms. "Miss Miller, you are facing several potential federal charges," the lead lawyer, a sharp woman named Maria Flores, explained. "First, interference with the operations of a transportation facility. When your actions directly led to the shutdown of a terminal, you crossed a very serious line. Second, destruction of a travel document, which under post-9/11 statutes can be a felony. And third, given the identity of the passenger's father, we are exploring charges under 18 U.S. Code Section 111, which pertains to assaulting, resisting, or impeding certain officers or employees of the United States." Karen stared at her blankly. "I didn't assault anyone, and she's not an employee." "Her father is Marcus Williams, the Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security," Flores said flatly. "The statute can be interpreted to include actions taken against the immediate family of a high-ranking protected official if the act is intended to intimidate or interfere with that official's duties. Your harassment of his daughter on federally regulated ground will be looked at through that lens. Did you think you were just hassling some random kid?" The name finally registered: Marcus Williams. She'd seen him on the news, standing behind the president during press conferences about national security. He was one of the most powerful, non-elected officials in the country, and she had laughed in his daughter's face. The full, terrifying weight of her actions finally crushed her. This wasn't about being fired. This wasn't about being shamed on the internet. This was about prison. This was about her entire life being irrevocably destroyed because she couldn't stand the sight of a black teenager holding a first-class ticket. The cosmic irony was crushing. In her quest to exercise a tiny bit of power, she had provoked a force she couldn't possibly comprehend. Her sobs started again, no longer angry or theatrical, but the broken, hopeless sound of utter despair. It was the sound of hard karma, delivered not by fate or chance, but by the cold, efficient machinery of the very system she had so smugly weaponized. As Apex Air Flight 215 descended through the iconic fog blanketing the San Francisco Bay, Jordan Williams was oblivious to the firestorm she had left in her wake. She had spent the flight reviewing her presentation, refining the complex code demonstrations, and mentally preparing for the Quanda session with some of the sharpest minds in technology. The incident at the gate felt distant, a bizarre and ugly prelude to the real purpose of her journey. When the plane landed at SFO, she deplaned like any other passenger. But as she stepped into the terminal, she realized something was different. People were looking at her, not with the idle curiosity of fellow travelers, but with recognition. A young woman in a university sweatshirt pointed, whispering to her friend, "That's her. That's the girl from the video." Her phone, which she had switched out of airplane mode, began to vibrate uncontrollably. The screen lit up with an impossible number of notifications. News alerts with her name in the headline, thousands of new followers on her social media accounts, an email from Robert Morrison, the CEO of Apex Air himself, containing a groveling multi-page apology and an offer of a lifetime of free first-class flights anywhere in the world. She was met at the jet bridge by a woman in a sleek business suit holding a sign that read Williams Innovate X. "Jordan Williams?" the woman asked, her eyes wide with a newfound respect. "I'm Sarah from the conference. We have a car for you. We saw what happened. We are all so incredibly sorry you had to go through that." "It's okay," Jordan said, though the sheer scale of the reaction was beginning to dawn on her. The car ride to her hotel in downtown San Francisco was a blur of scrolling through her phone. She watched the video Mr. Harrison had taken. It was even worse than she remembered. Seeing it from an outside perspective, Karen's sneering face, her own quiet defiance, was jarring. She read the comments, a tidal wave of support that was both heartwarming and overwhelming. She wasn't just Jordan Williams, the tech prodigy, anymore. She was now a symbol. The next morning, as she prepared for her keynote address, the story had evolved. News outlets had dug deeper. They weren't just reporting on the incident, but on her. Headlines now read, "Teen tech genius racially profiled on her way to accept major award." They detailed her invention, Nexus, her academic achievements, and her upcoming speech at Innovate X. The story of Karen Miller's prejudice had inadvertently become the greatest marketing campaign Jordan's work could have ever asked for. The main hall at the Moscone Center was packed. Innovate X was always a popular event, but today, the room was overflowing. People who had originally planned to attend other panels had flocked to hers, eager to see the young woman at the center of the viral storm. The media presence was 10 times what had been scheduled. When she was introduced, the applause was thunderous. It wasn't just for her expected achievements. It was applause of solidarity, of admiration for her grace under fire. Jordan walked onto the stage, took a deep breath, and looked out at the thousands of faces. She could follow her prepared speech, stick to the technical details of her algorithm, but she knew she couldn't. The moment demanded more. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady. "My presentation today is about data compression. It's about taking something large and complex and making it smaller, more efficient, without losing the essential information." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "This week I was reminded that we often do the same thing with people. We take a quick look at someone, at their age, their gender, their race, and we compress them. We shrink them down into a tiny, simple, manageable file in our minds, a label, a stereotype, and in doing so we lose the essential information. We lose the fidelity of their soul." A hush fell over the massive hall. "Prejudice is the ultimate lossy compression algorithm," she continued, her voice ringing with passion. "It discards the data of a person's character, their intellect, their kindness, their potential. It leaves you with a corrupted file, a distorted image that serves only the person doing the compressing. My work, Nexus, is about preserving fidelity, and I believe our work as human beings should be the same." She then launched into her presentation. She was brilliant. She explained her complex algorithms with an elegance and clarity that left the audience spellbound. She was poised, funny, and utterly in command of her subject. When she finished, the room erupted in a standing ovation that went on for several minutes. In the aftermath, the titans of tech didn't just want to meet her, they wanted to fund her. A bidding war erupted. Representatives from Google, Apple, and a dozen top-tier venture capital firms cornered her. By the end of the day, she hadn't just accepted an award. She had closed a Series A funding round of $50 million for her new company, Nexus Innovations, making her one of the youngest self-made tech CEOs in history. She politely declined Apex Air's offer of lifetime free flights. Instead, her new legal team sent them a counter-proposal: donate the monetary equivalent of that offer, an estimated $2 million, to a non-profit foundation that provides STEM education scholarships for underprivileged minority students. Faced with a PR crisis of their own making, Apex Air agreed immediately and announced the donation in a public press release, praising Jordan's magnanimity. The legend of Jordan Williams was cemented. She was the girl who faced down racism with grace and then leveraged the incident to fund a generation of future innovators. But as Jordan celebrated with her new investors, the other side of the story was reaching its grim conclusion. Karma, as Jordan's father had often explained it, wasn't a mystical cosmic force that balanced the scales of good and evil from on high. It was a simpler, more terrestrial phenomenon. It was the natural, logical, and often brutal downstream consequence of a person's choices, like a river inevitably finding its way to the sea. For Karen Miller, the river of her choices led directly off a cliff. The fall was long, and the landing was absolute. Her journey through the legal system was a humiliating lesson in the reversal of power. The woman who had wielded her gate agent authority like a monarch found herself powerless in the cold, beige halls of the Queens County Criminal Court. She sat beside her court-appointed lawyer, a harried young man who seemed to have permanently tired eyes, and listened as her life was dissected under the flat, fluorescent lights. Her lawyer argued for leniency, painting a picture of a woman under stress, a dedicated employee of 22 years who had made a single catastrophic error in judgment. "This was not a malicious act, Your Honor," he pleaded, but a lapse magnified into a global spectacle by the unfortunate celebrity of the parties involved. Then, the prosecutor from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Maria Flores, stood up. She was sharp, precise, and held no pity in her eyes. She didn't raise her voice. She simply laid out the facts, each one a nail in Karen's coffin. She played a portion of Mr. Harrison's video on the courtroom monitors. The entire room watched in silence as Karen's sneering face, larger than life, mocked a 17-year-old girl. They heard her derisive laugh. They saw the theatrical, aggressive rip of the boarding pass. Karen was forced to watch herself, to see the ugly caricature she had become, and she shrank in her seat, the shame a hot, physical presence. "This was not a lapse, Your Honor," Flores stated calmly, gesturing to the frozen image of Karen on the screen. "This was a pattern. The defense speaks of a 22-year career. The prosecution has records of 12 formal complaints filed against Miss Miller for abusive behavior, 6 of which explicitly cited racial bias. This was not a single error. It was simply the first time her behavior was directed at someone connected to a system powerful enough to hold her accountable." Flores continued, her words methodical. "Her actions were not merely rude. They were an abuse of her position of authority, a position granted to her under federal aviation regulations. When she chose to interfere with a passenger and destroy a travel document, she attacked the integrity of that system. The subsequent shutdown of an international terminal, the federal response, these were not overreactions. They were the system's pre-programmed defense against the exact type of targeted obstruction Miss Miller initiated. She didn't just break a rule, she triggered a tripwire she didn't even know was there." Faced with the video, the documented history of complaints, and the unyielding pressure from the federal prosecutor, Karen accepted a plea bargain. She pleaded guilty to a single felony count of interference with security screening personnel. The judge, a stern woman named Eleanor Vance, looked down at Karen from the bench, her expression one of deep disappointment. "Miss Miller," Judge Vance began, her voice filling the silent courtroom, "you wore a uniform that represented not just an airline, but a vital part of our nation's infrastructure. With that uniform came a profound responsibility to treat every single person with dignity and impartiality. You failed in that duty in the most spectacular way. You wielded your small measure of power not to serve, but to humiliate. You looked at a young, brilliant woman, a citizen you were meant to assist, and saw only a target for your own bitterness." The judge adjusted her glasses. "Therefore, I accept the plea agreement. You are sentenced to 2 years of federal probation. You will complete 500 hours of community service, which you will serve at the Museum of Tolerance and Human Dignity, where perhaps you can begin to learn what you so clearly lack. You will pay a fine of $10,000. Then came the final, crushing blow. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "as a direct consequence of your felony conviction under this specific statute related to aviation security, your name will be permanently entered into the federal no-fly list database. The freedom of movement you so casually denied to another will now be permanently denied to you. You, Miss Miller, are grounded." The word grounded hung in the air. Karen felt the last of her strength leave her. The ultimate, most poetic irony. She, the gatekeeper, was now locked out of the skies forever. Her world, once defined by destinations she could only dream of, had irrevocably shrunk. The first few months of her new life were a series of slammed doors. The court sentence was just the beginning. The real punishment was meted out by society. Her name and face were infamous. She applied for a receptionist job at a local dental practice. The interview went well until the hiring manager, a pleasant woman named Susan, paused. "You know, you look so familiar," Susan said, tilting her head. A moment later, a flash of horrified recognition crossed her face. The interview ended abruptly. Susan called back an hour later. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice strained with politeness. "But we've decided to go in a different direction." This scene repeated itself a dozen times. At a call center, a department store, a temp agency, the moment of recognition, the awkward silence, the polite rejection. She was a digital leper, her online reputation preceding her like a blaring siren. Her personal life disintegrated with the same brutal efficiency. Her husband, Mark, had endured the initial storm of public shaming, the dirty looks at the grocery store, the neighbors who suddenly wouldn't meet his eye, his co-workers' awkward jokes. But it was the slow, grinding reality of being married to a pariah that wore him down. One evening, after another day of fruitless job searching, Karen came home to find him packing a suitcase. "I can't do this anymore, Karen," he said, not looking at her. "Do what?" she asked, her voice hollow. "This," he exploded, gesturing around their small living room, at the drawn blinds, at the muted television. "Living in a bunker. Being the husband of that racist gate agent. You didn't just ruin your life, you ruined mine. Was it worth it? Tell me, was making that girl feel small for 5 minutes worth all of this?" She had no answer. He left that night, and the silence in the house became a deafening roar. Within 3 months, unable to make payments, the bank foreclosed. She lost the house they had shared for 15 years. She moved into a drab one-bedroom apartment complex by the expressway, the sound of traffic a constant reminder of a world that was moving on without her. Her community service was a weekly exercise in humiliation. At the Museum of Tolerance, she was assigned the most menial tasks, cleaning display cases, sorting brochures, scrubbing floors in the restrooms. She worked in silence, surrounded by exhibits detailing the very history of prejudice and intolerance she had so casually embodied. She saw pictures of civil rights protesters being assailed with fire hoses. She read testimonies from Holocaust survivors. She was supposed to absorb lessons of empathy and understanding, but her heart was too full of resentment. This wasn't a path to redemption for her. It was just the grinding salt of her punishment. Even David Chen, the supervisor whose weakness had been the fertile soil for Karen's toxicity, could not escape the blast radius. Apex Air fired him for gross negligence. his 20-year career erased in a single HR meeting. The investigative report cited his repeated failure to formally discipline Karen as a direct contributor to the 9-figure corporate disaster. While he avoided legal trouble, his professional reputation was shattered. He eventually found a job as the night manager at an econo-stay motel off the interstate. His new kingdom was one of broken ice machines, rowdy truck drivers, and the lingering smell of stale cigarettes. One night, while flipping through channels in the deserted lobby, he saw a news segment. The anchor was profiling the year's most influential innovators. And there she was, Jordan Williams, smiling, confident on the cover of Forbes magazine. David Chen stared at the screen, the remote slipping from his hand. He felt a deep, hollow ache of regret, not just for his lost career, but for his own cowardice. He thought of the 6 complaints. He could have written her up. He could have started the process. He could have done his job. His inaction had been its own kind of poison, and now he was living in its bleak aftermath. A year to the day after the incident at JFK, Jordan Williams stood in her spacious, minimalist home in the Palo Alto Hills, overlooking the soft glow of Silicon Valley. The Forbes magazine with her face on the cover sat on her coffee table. Her company, Nexus Innovations, was being hailed as the next unicorn, its data compression technology already revolutionizing half a dozen industries. Her philanthropic foundation, initially funded by Apex Air's panicked donation, was now a major force in STEM education, having sponsored its first class of 100 minority students through college. She was on a Zoom call, not with venture capitalists, but with those students. She saw their faces, bright, eager, full of dreams. A young man from the Bronx was going to MIT to study robotics. A young woman from rural Alabama was the first in her family to attend university, majoring in computer science at Tuskegee. This, Jordan thought, was the real result. This was the positive sum equation. This was building something better. Later that evening, a Google alert for her name popped up on her phone. It was an anniversary piece from a Long Island local paper, a Where Are They Now story. It detailed her meteoric rise and then turned its attention to Karen Miller. It described her current life with stark journalistic detachment, the cramped apartment near the highway, the string of failed job applications, the social exile. The article concluded with a quote from an unnamed former colleague. "What she did was indefensible," the person said, "but the bitterness ate her alive long before that day. In the end, she didn't just tear up a boarding pass. She tore up her own life." Jordan put the phone down, a wave of profound sadness washing over her. There was no joy in reading of Karen's desolate existence, no triumphant feeling of victory. There was only a cold, hollow sense of waste, a human being broken and isolated, trapped in a prison of her own making. She thought about the infinite variables. What if her father hadn't been the Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security? What if Mr. Harrison hadn't filmed it? She would have been just another girl, humiliated at a gate, her story unheard, her pain invisible. Justice, she realized, was still far too dependent on luck. She walked to the large glass wall of her living room, which doubled as a transparent data board. On it, complex algorithms were scrawled in erasable marker, pathways of logic and consequence. She thought about her work, about systems and inputs and outputs, and she finally understood karma in terms she could process. For every input, an output. For every action, a reaction. Karen Miller had written a single malicious line of code into the system of the world. She just never imagined the system would compile and run it against her with such devastating, irrevocable efficiency. The equation had been balanced, but Jordan found no peace in the solution. There was only the quiet resolve to keep writing a better code for the world, one that didn't just punish the corrupted files, but created a system where they were less likely to be written in the first place. The story of Jordan Williams and Karen Miller is more than just a viral video or a moment of airport drama. It's a powerful, real-world reminder that our actions, no matter how small they seem, have consequences that can ripple out in ways we can never predict. It's a story about grace in the face of prejudice, and the undeniable truth that character, not the color of your skin or the price of your ticket, is the true measure of a person. Jordan's calm strength turned an act of hate into a platform for positive change, proving that the best response to those who try to tear you down is to rise so high they can no longer reach you. If this story moved you, please take a moment to hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And for more true stories of karma, justice, and the incredible power of the human spirit, make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. What did you think of Karen's karma? Let us know in the comments below.